World history, the epitome of a disturbing reality and the precedent that formed our society today. Without history, we can find it quite difficult to understand why our world is the way it is today, how our government was constructed and formed, and how some of the conflicts we as humans are going through now have root causes hundreds of years ago. This is world history. Let's turn the clock back 10,000 years, and here we experience when it all started, the Neolithic Revolution. Now, before this, humans were prone to hunting and gathering, and that takes us back to about 2 million BC. However, humans started developing ideas of domesticating animals and plants, which changed their diets. More happened though. People started making civilizations, got into the nasty habit of compelled obedience, or in other words, slavery, and built magnificent structures, pyramids, temples, palaces, you name it, they got it. Empires were built, the Romans, the rise and fall of the Greeks, imperial China, the Persians, all formed and adapted to a new societal norm, with gender hierarchies, global interaction, and drumroll please, trade. Trade leads us to the Silk Roads found in Eurasia, a network of merchants hopping from one country to another, trading their most valuable materials. But there wasn't only one trading road. There were sea roads which connected distant countries in the Eastern Hemisphere and opened the Indian Ocean to a complicated system of exchange. In addition to Silk Roads and sea roads, there were sand roads, which existed between North Africa, the Mediterranean, and West Africa. Now, this all led to the golden ages of the Islamic Empire, but Europe was experiencing the opposite of the golden age. They were experiencing... what's the opposite of golden? Europe was in its dark ages, meaning they were in the midst of a pandemic. No, Charlie, they were not infected with coronavirus. They were plagued by the Black Death for roughly around 5 years. Populations, villages, and entire towns were wiped out. But things started to turn out for Europe. Europe went through what was called the Renaissance. This was a period of time where artists, scientists, musicians, mathematicians, you name it, turned up and got together to create a community of urbanization and innovations. The printing press was finally invented, meaning that writing books wouldn't have to take ages since everything was done by hand. The Protestant Reformation took place, where people began questioning the Catholic Church, which at that time was the most powerful religion in Europe and ended up giving priests lots of power. This obviously didn't settle too well with the Europeans. Enough about Europe, let's talk exploration. Now you may say, Grace, isn't exploration revolved around Europe? That's what your textbook taught you in 5th grade. But when learning about history, we need to take in consideration of Zhang He's massive 400 feet treasure ship and the mighty Vikings. Of course, we can't forget about the Polynesians and Islam and their spice trade. These people explored way before Europe even got into the game. But when Portugal started exploring, oh boy, a new wave of European explorers started following in. There was Vasco da Gama, who sailed around Africa to get to India, Fernão Gomes, who opened the Gold Coast, and Bartholomew Diaz, who discovered the tip of Africa. And of course, we have our favorite little explorer, Christopher Columbus, who arguably isn't the best person, but he did contribute to history. He founded the Americas. Then that's when colonization began. But first, let's talk about the Columbian Exchange. This was the movement of goods, animals, plants, people, cultures, ideas, and technology. Charlie, what did you say? I didn't hear you. What? Diseases? Oh, and diseases. There was the transatlantic slave trade, which was when millions and millions of Africans were taken from their home and sold to people in the New World. Jumping forward a few years, taking place in Europe was the Enlightenment, which was when philosophers got great ideas about government, religion, and economics. They believed that the world had room for improvement and happiness in life was a natural right. A few of these thinkers were Thomas Hobbes, who believed that humans were naturally cruel and selfish. One of his contradictors was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I can't believe I did that. Who believed people are naturally good, but when in power, it corrupts them into greed. Baron de Montesquieu believed in a system of checks and balances. John Locke believed that people were born with natural rights, and Cesare Beccaria hated the idea of abuse in the justice system. We can all probably guess where those ideas ended up. If you guessed the Treaty of Paris, you are wrong. This all shows up in our Constitution, or the Bill of Rights, which is also in the Constitution.
We now present our viewers with a short sponsored video. Expensive plane tickets to France? Fear not, France's First Estate can help you pay for it. The First Estate is made up of clergies of the Roman Catholic Church and the most powerful, to say the least.
But watch out for the Third Estate. They're saying that they're the ones who support the First Estate financially. They're saying that they work to pay taxes. They're saying that they hate the special treatment of the First and Second Estates. And oh no, France is in debt now because of the king's lavish spending. There's no one to buy you your plane ticket now. But wait, here comes Napoleon. Can he save the day? And he does. He creates reforms that end the financial crisis and the unequal class system. What did you say, Charlie? I told you, Grace, Napoleon wasn't all rainbows and unicorns. He became a whole dictator and even tried to take over Europe. Is that right, Charlie? Well, if you're still looking for that plane ticket, just ask Napoleon. He'll give it to you. With a few tiny exceptions, for instance, probably trying to colonize where you live and taking over your house and stealing all of your money, but no biggie. And we're back. Let's jump to Europe. Again, Europe was essentially where the Industrial Revolution began in 1700.
The invention of the spinning jenny in 1765 initiated the textile industry, and the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1794 caused a boom in cotton production, which led to the increase of slaves. Around this time period, the steam engine was developed, which impacted transportation greatly, allowing more efficiency.
There was child labor, the role of women changed, whereas they used to stay home, they now could work in factories, but at a price. They only got half of men's salary and spent long hours away from their children. There was a sudden increase in nationalism in Europe, where people wanted to gain power and trade, and the demand for raw material led to colonization. Europeans colonized places in Africa, China, India, and took all the large deposits of natural resources. In 1914, Europe controlled about 90% of Africa, and different European countries wanted a piece of Africa. They built railroads, new transportation routes, but forced Africans to convert into Christians and learn the European language. And finally, World War I, the largest and most destructive war the world has ever seen. But how did it start and when did it end? Charlie, you take this one. On the fateful day of July 28, 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were assassinated by Serbian terrorists. A growing conflict arose between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. Allies were formed, and Germany and Austria-Hungary were known as the Central Powers, along with Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire.
However, Germany had to fight on two fronts, and many of their plans failed to work.
Men were volunteering by will in the beginning, but when the war started to turn bad, drafting was used. The role of women changed as well. They took on dangerous jobs at factories where men fighting in the war used to work. Resources were also becoming scarce, and the government used rationing, which allowed people to have a little bit of every essential resource. As for warfare tactics, trench warfare was most commonly used, and soldiers relied on little food that was, to say the least, disgusting, and were constantly pestered by rats. There were now technological advancements, for instance, long-range artillery, tanks, poison gas, and airplanes. By the end of the war, 21 million men were injured and 18 million had died. The war finally ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and a League of Nations was formed, which included a court of justices to settle disagreements and punish Germany. Obviously, Germany wasn't happy with paying $33 billion and giving up all its land in Europe and overseas colonies. But we'll talk about what they did as payback. See you next time. Mash Morse is produced by Grace Howe and her alternate ego Charlie. She has found all her images on Google and learned all her material from Miss Ferreira's AP World History course in Advanced Academy. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next